Okay, so now let's get into Oracle ASM. And this section will be very high level information about Oracle ASM. ASM is Oracle's primary shared storage for Oracle database. And by using ASM, you can simplify storage management. Okay, without ASM, you will have to configure logical volume through the logical volume manager, and then you create file system. Okay, so you will have to manage a different component, possibly by using different vendors' solution to create file system, to use to create a logical volume group by using different volume vendors' volume manager. But with the ASM storage, file system is a part of ASM, logical volume manager, and that's part of ASM, underlying storage, part of ASM. So we can simplify storage management. Especially, I will give you this information. ASM storage solution. And the first component was ASM instance. And this is a logical volume manager. I will just use this as logical volume manager for ASM storage. And depending on your deployment option, you can actually deploy ASM instance different way. I will briefly introduce. And we also have ASM disk group, work groups. Okay? And you can think about this as a volume group. If you have one or more volumes, you group them together, creating volume group. And main purpose of a volume group is to create file system bigger, okay, and larger. The same thing in ASM. By adding additional ASM disks, you can make ASM disk group bigger. Thus, you can create bigger ASM file system. And also, we have ASM disks as well. Okay, and you can actually use a different form of disk devices as ASM disk. For example, volume can be ASM disk, and also partition as ASM disk, and in Exadata environment, and create disk as ASM disk, and also entire physical disk as ASM disk, and run as ASM disk. There are many actual different forms. And then we have file system, either ASM native file system, and also you can have ACFS file system. And this is actually our ASM storage solution component. So when you say ASM, this is not in a single component. And this consists of many different components. ASM instance, ASM disk group, ASM disks, ASM, and ACFS. So that's what you have to know. Let's come back here. And Oracle ACFS, it is a multi-platform and scalable file system and storage management technology that extend Oracle ASM functionalities. So in this diagram, you see ASM here, ASM layer, and definitely your database is stored in ASM directly. And you can also create ACFS file system to store application data here. And starting with the 12C, you can also create Oracle database files in ASM storage. Okay, and in order to create ACFS file system, you must create ASM dynamic volume manager file, and then you can create ACFS file system. Now, when you get into ACFS in this area, and you will learn a little more information. There are many features of ACFS. So what could be an ACFS feature? ACFS. In 12C and 12CR2, ACFS, it provided many of ACFS features, and to make ACFS and more valuable. For example, ACFS support database file creation in ACFS location. Now, what is the benefit? By doing so, you can create snapshot, which means that you can create a snapshot of a database in ACFS. And also, you can create snaps of snap as well. That's another nice feature. So if you have a snapshot as a gold image, you can create updatable snapshot, or you can create read-only snapshot as well. And also, we have a replication feature. Your ACFS can be replicated from primary to standby ACFS file system. And we can also take advantage of a security feature. Okay? Security feature. And also, you can apply security feature at the group of directories and also group of files. So we have a tagging feature. And also, we have NFS feature, but that is a highly available NFS. And there are more features available. Okay? So there are many features of ACFS. In order to create this ACFS file system, and we will have to create volume file like this. So for example, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 ASM disks. And in this ASM disk, okay, I create ASM disk group, and then what you're gonna do is you create a file. The file name is volume. So the file is volume. So you create volume file. Okay, that's ASM volume, ASM file type. In this the ASM volume file, you can create ACFS file system. So ASM, the volume manager, controls disk IOs. Okay, so that is ACFS and also ASM volume concept. So let's come back here. And it supports database files and other files and spread data across disks to balance load and provide integrated metering across disk. What is the meaning of striping and metering with the ASM storage solution? So let me give you this example. I have this example. Okay, so the diagram on top here, and this is a 5-node cluster. I just made an example. Okay. In this example, we have cluster 01 that consists of host 01, host 02, host 03, host 04, host 05. It's a 5-node cluster. And also in the underlying storage, we configure the storage in this way. So we have a disk array, and I don't know how many disks in this disk array. I just made it an example. And we also have a disk array 2, and disk array 3, and disk array 3. Let's say each disk array comes with 12 physical disks. Okay? And then we create LUNs. In each disk array, we want to create 2 LUNs, 2 LUNs, and 2 LUNs, and 2 LUNs, logical disks. Okay? From the host point of view, from each server point of view, there are 2 disk devices presented from each disk array. So 2, another 2, another 2, another 2. So total 8 disk devices presented to each host in the cluster. Okay? And with the ASM storage, in order to isolate a failure, we actually subdivide ASM device at the failure group level. So we have one ASM disco group, and we create failure group 1 to group LUNs that are based out of disk array 1, another 2 LUNs out of a disk array 2, and so on. So we group devices together to isolate failures. That's our environment. And here, assuming that I want to use normal redundancy. So I want to make a normal redundancy example. So what is normal redundancy? Normal redundancy is two-way mirroring. Okay? How does Oracle support two-way mirroring? The idea is this. So assuming that I want to actually create a file in this ASM disco group. Okay? And it is normal redundancy. So I have double the files. Okay? So how do we create these files into normal redundancy ASM disco group? Now, ASM striping and mirroring is at the extent level, ASM extent level. And depending on your version of a database, ASM extent size may be 4 megabytes or 1 megabyte. Starting with the 12.2, the default size of ASM extent is 4 megabytes. So what we're going to do here is this. Okay, so we have actually a primary copy, 4 megabytes, secondary copy, 4 megabytes. And we store primary copy, secondary copy in the different failure groups. That is the rule. If you place a primary copy, secondary copy in the same failure group, then what will be a problem? It makes single point failure if you have underlying disk array problem. That's why what we do is we create one primary here, maybe secondary here. So we place primary extent and the secondary extent in the different failure groups. And the other one is, and I'm going to create primary copy here and the secondary copy here. So we spread in this way. And also we have a primary copy and secondary copy. And also we have a primary copy and secondary copy. So what do you see here? In each failure group, we stored same number of primary ASM extent and same number of secondary extent. So we were able to spread and we mirrored. And if there's any problem with the disk array in the first disk array, then only primary copy red color, secondary copy yellow color will get affected. But I don't have to worry about that because I already have another copy in another disk array, another primary copy here in another disk array, physically different location. So we can avoid a single point failure in this way. So mirroring and striping and management of storage is at the extent level. So we can perform storage management online and also adding disk online, removing disk online, balancing, the storage balancing is online. So many things can be done online. That's the beauty of ASM storage. So let's come back here. So now let's get into Oracle Flex ASM. What is Oracle Flex ASM? Okay, so let me get into here. Flex ASM is in this area. How do you want to deploy ASM instance? Do you want to deploy ASM instance with a standard way, or do you want to deploy the ASM instance with a flex option? That is actually there are two options in 12CR1. However, 12CR2, we only have a flex ASM mode. The reason is this. Flex cluster requires flex ASM. So without knowing Flex ASM, but one thing what we should know is this. Flex cluster requires Flex ASM. And we know that starting with the 12.2, we use a Flex cluster. So meaning that Flex ASM must be used. So what's the difference between standard ASM deployment and Flex ASM deployment? And difference is this. With the standard in the ASM deployment, let's say you have a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 node cluster. You have a 5 node cluster. In this case, to support ASM, we had to start ASM instance in each server. Okay? So if you have a 5 node cluster, we must have 5 ASM instances. And all your database client makes connection to these ASM instance locally. Okay, in this way. So local connection. If there's any problem with ASM, in this case, ASM instance here. So we have a problem with the ASM instance. That means your connected database instance will get affected. So it will be down. Wow. So we may have some temporary ASM instance problem. It caused my database instance failure. Wow, it's not good. Okay. What about this? You have another ASM problem. It causes instance failure. Wow, this is not good. Okay. Now, because of this region, we want to make our ASM more flexible. So now we have this configuration. We have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is my 5 node cluster. So that's just a single cluster. And what we're going to do here is, instead of starting ASM instance in each server, we choose only 3 locations. So we have a 1, 2, 3 locations. So we start only 3 ASM instances. And then you have a database. Database instance here. It has a connection. And also database instance, database instance, database instance, database instance. So it makes all local connection. Wait a minute. I have database instance that is running in the server, but there is no ASM instance in the same server. With the standard ASM deployment, if that is the case, my database instance must be down. However, with Flex ASM, we support remote ASM connection. That's available. So Flex ASM support the remote ASM client connection. That's actually Flex ASM. Okay? So with the standard ASM deployment, remote ASM client connection wasn't possible. However, with the Flex ASM, yes, it's possible. Okay? So that's the main difference between standard and Flex ASM deployment. So let's go back here. Oracle Flex ASM enables an Oracle ASM instance to run on a separate physical server from the database servers. Larger clusters of ASM instances can support more clients while reducing the ASM footprint for overall system. With a Flex ASM, you can consolidate all the storage requirement into a single set of disk groups. Okay, so as you can see, we can dramatically reduce the resources. And also, ASM client can be configured with direct access to the storage or I/O can be sent through pool of I/O server. This area is an example of the 12.2 new feature, but I will not touch in depth in this area. And here are the list of features. And the striping is at the file level, and the extent of a file. So we actually split files into extend, and extend is striped. And also, it provides redundancy on a file basis as well, meaning that instead of applying redundancy at the volume level, we apply redundancy at the file level. For example, you have an ASM disk group with a normal redundancy, two-way mirroring. And if you create a file in the normal redundancy ASM disk group, this will be a two-way mirroring by default. However, I'm storing very critical file, so I want to use triple mirroring for this specific file. Yes, you can do it. You can create template to enable triple mirroring, and when you create file, you're gonna actually specify template name. Or if you have a less important file, you can also disable mirroring feature as well at the file level. And also it enables online disk reconfiguration and dynamic rebalancing. Extend-based mirroring allow you to perform disk level and disk group level maintenance online. And also it's possible to reduce time to synchronize your ASM disk group in case of transient failures. And also it's possible to adjust rebalance speed when you add a new disk. When you remove a disk, you can instruct ASM to speed up by adding more processes or less number of processes to manage a resource usage. And ASM product is part of a grid infrastructure, and your cluster aware manages ASM, so ASM is a cluster aware. And it supports reading from mirrored copy instead of a primary copy, and this is an example of an extended cluster. If you have a multi-site cluster, we instruct ASM to read not only from mirrored copy, but also primary copy as well. And it is automatically installed as a part of a grid infrastructure. That's the list of benefits. Now I'm going to get into two simple questions, or three, to see if we understood it correctly. Which of the following statement regarding grid naming service is not true? And grid naming service is an integral component of a grid plug and play. Makes sense? So it obtains IP addresses automatically to configure newly added servers and also clean up network-related information, when you remove a server from the cluster. And also, each node in the cluster runs a multicast DNS process. Yes, so that way GNS connect to multicast DNS to resolve host name within the cluster. And GNS virtual IP address must be assigned by DHCP. No. If you remember my diagram, I gave you one of the three possible deployment options of a cluster. And when using GNS, we must add the static IP address of a GNS in the DNS. So assigning IP address of a GNS through DHCP is not the correct answer. The cluster subdomain is defined as a delegated domain. That is true. So C, this is not true. So the answer is C. Each cluster node's public Ethernet adapter must support UDP or RDS. No. And UDP RDS is only for private. So public Ethernet adapter must support TCP/IP. So the answer is false. And which of the following cluster types are available in Oracle ClusterWare 12.2? Standalone Oracle Domain Services cluster, and member cluster for Oracle database and for application, and extended clusters. But there is no Oracle leaf cluster concept. Okay? So the answer is A and B, D, E, F. So these are the answers. Okay, there is one in the long practice activity. In the practice session, I will demonstrate configuration of a standalone flex cluster or in a standalone cluster. Okay, and you will actually use the host 01 to host 05 to create a standalone cluster, and then we use this environment for different configuration of a rack database later on. And this is the last section of lesson 1.